Welcome. My name is Peter Herbeck. I'm here from Renewal Ministries, and I've got the great pleasure to be able to bring to you an interview I've wanted to do for a long time with Father James Mallon. Father James is the pastor of St. Benedict's Parish in Halifax, Nova Scotia. A very dynamic parish, I think a new Pentecost, new evangelization kind of parish that really is living that call. And Father's the author of a book I think is very, very important, and the reason mainly we're doing this is called Divine Renovation, Bringing Your Parish from Maintenance to Mission. Divine Renovation, Bringing Your Parish from Maintenance to Mission. Now, this is the older cover. Behind us is going to be the new cover.
That's right.
But, in this series of shows we're going to do 5 15-minute programs that are dealing with 5 key themes from the book that you put your finger on that you'd like to communicate. That's really what I want to try to do is draw out of you what's in here for our listeners. And so I want to ask first, why did you write the book?
Well, I think it really comes out of my own passion as a parish priest. I've been a parish priest for about 15 years, been a priest for 18 years, and just really struggling with the lack of a model of a renewed parish. You know, we have an amazing theology, but often to truly live out the faith, most Catholics have to go to the movements to find discipleship, authentic community, evangelization. Often parishes are centers of, well, I hate to say it, but often mediocrity and minimalism, you know. But in my own life, when I was young, when I first came alive in my faith, I basically went to my parish to receive communion. That was about it. Everything else I found outside. And I've always been haunted by that sense of, why is it like this? It doesn't have to be this way. It shouldn't be this way. And so for most of my ministry life, I've been looking outwards, looking at other churches, trying to learn from other churches, implementing things, making my own set of mistakes. And I think I'm always convinced we need to have a theology and a model for everything you do. Often we have great theology but no model, and sometimes we have models that don't have a good theology, so you need both. And the book basically is about 50% theology and 50% proposing a model. And right now we're trying to live this out in my present parish, St. Benedict Parish. I don't think we're there yet. We're on the journey from maintenance to mission. It's amazing what God has done, and it's incredibly exciting, and it's just I feel like I've got to pinch myself, but I'm still well aware that we've got a ways to go. We're not perfect by far, and we continue often to learn by the mistakes we make.
Well, I think one of the reasons I'm so excited about it is I had the privilege of visiting your parish a couple of times. Actually, was engaged in a parish mission there, and I'm deeply impressed from how you've gone from point A to point B, from point B to point C. You've got a huge engagement of lay people up and down, and this stuff is really happening. It's like a real sign of hope. And I know at the beginning of this series, I know one of the things we want to touch on was the problem, the fundamental issue of identity. Why don't you share with us?
Well, I think there's a lot of evaluations that talk about different crises within the church, and my own conviction is that the number one crisis is an identity crisis, because it's not simply about, you know, best practices or what we should do. What we do is always rooted in our sense of who we are. Even in the ministry of Jesus, you know, the key turning points in his ministry, both in his beginning of his public ministry, the Transfiguration, were moments where he had his identity affirmed, you know, within his human nature. So I think the fundamental problem is an identity crisis. We've forgotten who we are. See, we are a missionary church. That's the original meaning of apostolic. We're a missionary church. We don't have a mission. We are mission. It's not so much that the Church of Jesus Christ is a mission as that the mission of Jesus Christ has a church. We are missionary by nature, but oftentimes if we look at what we do in parishes, we get the sense that, well, mission, that is to go, because the word missio means to go, is something that we might eventually get to at some point. We kind of know we're supposed to do that, but we might eventually get to it. So rather than being missionary, often in our parishes, we become maintenance focused. And that is that we're content to maintain the flock. And that sometimes our best parishes, they're maintaining the flock. And that's no easy thing, by the way. To maintain the flock is a very challenging thing.
In a broad way, it's part of the church's evangelistic mission. In a broad term, how people understand that, oftentimes, it's the church's overall mission.
That's
but
right.
There's something more precise when you talk about mission, what you mean by that.
Well, it means that I think, you know, going back to the Great Commission, you know, like how do we find out what's it all about? What's the purpose? And this often will cut through a lot of the conversations we have, you know, to have a clear purpose. As someone once said, the main thing is to keep the main thing. But what is the main thing? Because in the life of a parish, there can be so many things going on, so much busyness, so many requests for time and energy and events. We've only got limited energy and time. And the question is, what is the main thing? Are we so lost in busyness that we've forgotten the main thing? Well, I believe we just simply have to turn to the Great Commission. And you see in the Great Commission 4 tasks. There's the task to go, to make, to baptize, and to teach. And with any sentence, there's always a finite verb, which is the grammatical center of any sentence. And with the Great Commission, in the original language, the 3 of the verbs are participles, so they're, in a sense, conditional on the finite verb. And so, arguably, one of these tasks, to go, make, baptize, and teach, is the heart, the grammatical heart of the sentence, and therefore, I think, the theological heart. And it's the verb to make. Actually, in the original language, make disciples. This is a word in Greek. We don't have one word in English or Latin, but it's make disciples. And so Jesus basically says, go make disciples and baptize them and teach them. But what do we do? If you look at what we do, that we've been good at going, we're very good at baptizing, we're good at sacraments and liturgy, and we're fairly good at teaching. We have catechetical problems. But our frustrations in ministry, we get frustrated because in spite of our going, our baptizing, teaching, we haven't made disciples. And what is a disciple? A disciple who is one who has encountered the Lord, who has grown in that personal relationship with the Lord, who's made a decision to follow Him, to surrender his or her life to Him, and has, within that person, there's been awakened a hungering, a desire. Because if you don't care that you don't know. And often we in the church will attack a problem of people not caring as if it's just a question of them not knowing. So we say, here, learn this information. We use catechesis where we should be seeking to evangelize people. And so I really believe evangelization is complete when a person has become a disciple. But then the disciple must become an apostle. It's not enough to make a disciple. The word disciple means someone who learns. But the disciple must become an apostle or a missionary. And that's one of the terms Pope Francis uses, is a missionary disciple.
Yeah, and he actually says, he underlines that a number of times. He said, I'm not just saying disciple, you are a missionary disciple.
That's right.
And then he says at another point in Evangelii Gaudium, he said, I am a mission in this world.
That's right.
That's why I exist. And he said every baptized Catholic, every Catholic has to come to the point where they're literally converted, have a new way of thinking about themselves, that I exist for mission, for the mission of the King.
And so this is the main thing that we've got to keep the main thing, that we've got to make disciples and then equip them, bring them to maturity, and while we're doing that, equip them for ministry so they can live out their mission within the world. That's the primary task of the church. And that means not just reaching people in the pews. It's not just, Jesus didn't say go and be disciples. He said, go and make disciples. And he didn't say, go make disciples of people who are in your pews. He said, go to all nations and make disciples. So we've got to be outward focused to reach the unchurched. And I think that when we realize that, we truly accept the fact that this is our fundamental identity, and if we live by that identity, it's going to change a lot of things within a parish.
And how did you, when you first started at St. Benedict's, what was the condition of the church you were facing, and how did you begin to implement this?
Well, I inherited a church that had gone through a great change because our previous bishop had seen the need for changing the infrastructure of our diocese, and he had said in different regions, okay, in this area we need one parish, but he let the local parishes decide what they were going to do with their buildings. And so in this one particular area, under the leadership of the previous pastor, there was a decision made to close and sell the 3 buildings, which were all like half a mile or a mile away from each other, and to consolidate those resources and to have one church building. And so that was a very difficult process. Within 2.5 months of the new building being opened, I arrived as pastor before the first ministry year began. And people were breathing this great sigh of relief. They were thinking, oh, finally, all the change is over. Thanks be to God, no more change. And I arrived and basically said, well, guess what? The change thus far has been cosmetic. As difficult as it's been cosmetic, because I said, what's to stop the decline that has necessitated the amalgamation and closure of our churches from continuing to undermine what we're doing if all we do is come into this building and do everything the same as we've always done before?
Because we've been basically managing decline. We've been maintaining and it's declining, and we have no way of turning the tide, as it were. We just keep shrinking and creating different situations because of that steady decline.
That's right. And so it was basically about coming in and presenting a vision for something different, you know, like naming the challenge, the issue, without, you know, demoralizing people or without blaming the people in the past, because, you know, pointing the finger is never that great, and there's always three fingers pointing back at ourselves when you point one. You know, the point is that I don't think anyone could have guessed about the kind of accelerated social change in the last 50 years, and the fact that in all avenues of life, human beings, we generally stick to what we know. We stick to methods of the past. We go forward to, like when you row a boat, you go forward while you're looking backwards, and it's the same in the church. And still to this day, in spite of these massive changes, for the most part in our parishes, we still employ pastoral models that are based on the presumptions of 50 years ago. And of course, there's been an incredible paradigm shift, if you will. And so I came into the parish trying to identify these things and try to awaken, you know, a kind of a desire for within people to change. But here's the challenge. If you ask people, do you want a church that's missionary, that's outward focused? People say, yeah,
for sure, Father.
Do you want a church that's more loving?
Yeah.
You want a church that's more welcoming, more joyful, that's able to reach out to the poor, the poor, a church that is evangelizing, seeing lives transformed? Everyone wants the change, but no one wants to change. And as soon as you begin to change something, that's when the proverbial fan will hit the wall, because people say, well, wait a minute. And that's where we have revealed to us one of the primary problems with the church is that rather than being a church that is outward focused and exists for the sake of the other, our communities are often revealed to be kind of social clubs where all of this is really about me and it's for me. And you know, I love your idea of change, but don't inconvenience me, don't challenge me. And so whenever you clarify purpose, if a parish is able to regain its sense of identity and succeed in making the main thing, it will mean actually beginning to change things. And that will eventually introduce pushback.
Yeah, and I think from your experience and having spoken with you and just written the book, that the change didn't come just because you were so persuasive about change, that the change agent is bringing people to encounter Jesus in a new way. And to say a little bit more about that. We're just got a few minutes left in this segment. I think that's where identity comes from, and that's the key.
There's no other way. This is how a disciple is made, is by encountering Jesus, coming into relationship with Jesus, and making a decision to be his disciple. I think all of that needs to happen. And the more that happens, the more it grows within a parish. And what we're really looking for here, and we're going to talk about this, I think, in a later segment, is cultural shift. And that means redefining everything that you presume to be the norm, presume to be normative. And in many of our churches, that kind of way of living the faith is not normative. And so the first consequence of grasping this identity change means that the primary task before us then is changing that culture. And for many parishes, it means getting a sense of momentum moving on this. Now, that momentum is created when more and more people come to know Jesus in a personal way. And we began to use testimonies presented in writing and in person to begin to normalize the fact that, Jesus wants to change lives, and this is what it's all about. And then you hit that critical mass of so many people, and we've used the tool of Alpha as our primary evangelistic tool, and it's been an incredible blessing.
Provide that place of encounter, introduction to the person of Jesus. Now, a lot of the people who are listening to this are hopefully pastors and people who are involved in leading parishes and the like. I'd just like to ask as we close this section, when you began, did you have a real clear picture in mind? You had the vision already and everything was there and it was all clear, or was it a real struggle for you to be able to lay hold of it and to be willing to face the opposition? How did it work for you when you began, just on a personal level?
Yeah, I think it begins very much in the heart of the pastor. I mean, it's the primary role of a leader, I think, is to cast vision. And vision has been defined as a vision of the future that produces passion in us. I think we're going to talk a bit more about the central role of vision. But if you're going to lead something, vision is about where we're going. And it's going to be something that makes you incredibly excited and passionate. If you don't know where you're going, if you're not excited about it, unfortunately, you're probably not going to lead anything.
And so really what comes together when you come to understand who you are, when you find out you're sent, you lay hold of your identity. When you know who you are, you're going to know about where you're supposed to go. Those two things are really connected. You can begin to evaluate what's a healthy parish. What are we supposed to look like? We can only do that if we know where we're supposed to go and who we are. And so that's really the starting point. That's where we are right now. We'll build on this.
That's right.
But anyway, Father, I think you've hit the nail on the head. Thanks.